We're going to read chapter 6 and 7 because 6 is relatively short. We have 9 minutes. Everyone, if they live long enough, will lose their way at some point. You will lose your way. You will wake up one morning and find yourself lost. This is a hard, simple truth. If it hasn't happened to you yet, consider yourself lucky. Nick Flynn. The ticking is the bomb. Chapter 6. The Businessman. God, it never did get easy, but it sure did get interesting. Right next to my nook was this fat little robin who would come visit me throughout the day to pick off the different bugs and worms that crawled around in the church's garden. I named him Frank, after my buddy from high school. Frank, the bird, not the fella, was more like a person than some people I know. For one thing, he always said hello to you. He would fly down and land right next to me and nod his head as if to say, "Morning, Henry. I'd love to stay and talk, but I got some business to take care of." He was territorial, too. This one time, a pigeon meandered on over to his spot, and wham! No warning or nothing. Just went straight for that pigeon's eyes. Never saw that pigeon come back for as long as I was there. And then there was the businessman. Every single morning, he would walk by my camp and just sneer at me. Red eyes oozing hate. First time I saw that look, I thought he was the devil. An honest-to-God Satan in pressed khakis. I caught myself, though, remembered how much of the rock gut I'd have had the night before. Muttered something to myself like, "Damn you, Henry. Ain't no such thing as devils on earth. Save for them that was born here." It was on. Not yet so unbearably cold that you had to leave the streets and register in one of the shelters. So I was camped out in front of Trinity Cathedral near East 22nd and Uslid. Eslid. Uslid? Ulcid. Euclid. Ulcid. Ulcid. They were pretty good with letting you stay there so long as you kept out the way and didn't cause no trouble. Even brought me a loaf of bread every now and then after service had lay out. I had 3 blankets, 3 coats, and a trash bag full of various knickknacks that I had to protect nightly. Because believe me, the bastards in those parts would have taken the coat off a dying man if they could snatch you away from his shaking fingers. So that was how I slept. One eye open, one hand on the ball, trash bag against my stomach, and blankets duct tape around my body. I had gotten the idea for the duct tape from this old street baron. And it worked. Twofold. It's a hell of a lot more difficult to steal from a man that's got his possessions wrapped around him like that. And it's a hell of a lot warmer when you're packed inside a taped up cocoon. Which was why the businessman hated me. Couldn't steal from me. Sure, you're saying. Why would a man in a suit and tie on his way to a salaried job want to steal from a man that's sleeping on the sidewalk covered in duct tape? I'll tell you why. A man like that don't become a man like him by walking the straight path. Every chance he sees to get ahead, he's going to take it. It only makes sense that he'd try and knock me down a peg, throw me in the mud just to let it be known that he is life's victor and that I'm life's loser, and that it was going to be like that forever. Let me tell you how I come. Early one Sunday morning, I awoke to the sound of fancy leather shoes clopping along near my body. I opened one bleary eye at a time, blinked out the sand, and as I tried to gather my surroundings, I noticed that everything was different. Yeah, it was early morning and still mostly dark, but it seemed as though the landscape around the church had changed. The landscaped shrubbery had turned to flames, and the city sidewalk has become rubble, almost like we'd been bombed overnight. It was this hellish post-war scenery, like a picture of Eastern Europe circa World War II. And then I saw him. Red eyes glowing, immaculate suit and tie, greasy hair, and I swear to God, looked like a tail swishing behind him as he walked, as impossible as it sounds. He looked deep into my eyes, and I was overcome with a terror that I'd never felt before. This nightmarish feeling that drained all the goodness from my soul, that made me want to cry out for protection. I shrank away from him in my duct-tape sleeping bag. As he stepped closer, I tried to wiggle free, but was bound so tightly by the tape that all I could do was violently jerk back and forth and roll down the sidewalk away from him. I flexed my arms and bent my legs and did everything I could, but to no avail. I was trapped in a cocoon of my own making. Henry, I remember thinking to myself, this is it. If you want to make out here alive, you're going to have to improvise. He was no more than 10 steps away from me, and had unflinchingly trained his eyes into mine. His pace quickened as he grew closer, and then he bent down to perform whatever devilish task he was about to perform. I lunged upwards towards his face, sleeping bag still attached to my body, and sunk my teeth into his ear. Yar! He tried to pull away, but I was jaw-locked to his ear, and wouldn't let go. I gritted my teeth, and shook side to side like an angry pit bull as the blood poured from his ear into my mouth and onto my face, descending down onto the blankets the sidewalk. I shook and shook till finally the ear ripped free from his head, and I fell back to the ground, the flesh still warm and creamy in my mouth. He shrank back in horror, with his hand clutching the side of his head, and then scampered away as quickly as he'd come. The cops showed up maybe 10 minutes later. I had fallen back asleep by the time they arrived, though I can't imagine it took them long to find me. I was the only pile of blankets on the block, the bloody pile of blankets on the block as far as I know. To be honest with you, when I saw those cops, man, I was relieved. Thank God y'all are here, I said. This bastard in a business suit just tried to rob me. And you know what? I squinted my eyes and lowered my voice to a whisper. I think he might have been the devil. So that's how I come. Sure, they tossed me in jail and into that nut house for a bit. But it was worth it. A few folks believe me. Say they've seen him too, and they call me a hero because of it. They say that if I hadn't done what I'd done, then that businessman would still be walking those streets stealing the belongings from them that don't have a home. That made me feel pretty good hearing that. A Robin Hood of the streets. Imagine that. Me, Hank Turner, a goddamn superhero. We will do it in 2 parts.